Okay.
Is that it? Okay. Yeah. Thanks very much. Welcome everybody to the Planning Development Management Committee on Thursday, the 20th of May, 2021. Please note that this is a remote meeting taking place of Aberdeen City Council's Planning Development Committee. The meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meetings. Can all the members of the committee keep their cameras switched on, but their microphones on mute unless invited to speak? I would remind the committee that the business today includes quasi-judicial matters. Members are reminded that they should not leave the room or the meeting during consideration of any application. I will now ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of the members participating today, and for all members to confirm their attendance once their name has been announced by the clerk, so that it's clear in the recording of the meeting and can also be recorded by the clerk for the minute. Mrs. McBain, over to you.
Thank you, Convener. So if you can just indicate for the recording that you're present. Convener?
Present.
Vice Convener?
Present.
Councillor Allen?
Sorry, I was muted. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Cook?
Here.
Councillor Copeland?
Present.
Councillor Cormie?
Present.
Councillor Gregg?
Here.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Present.
And Councillor Malik?
Present.
Okay, that's all 9 members present.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. McBain. Okay, if we move on to the agenda, item 1.1 is motion against officer's recommendation procedural note, which is on page 5 to 6. I take everybody's got that, not seeing otherwise. Moving on to 2.1, which is a determination of urgent business. There is none. Is at 3.1, we have declarations of interest. Is there any declarations of interest?
Yes.
Okay, I heard 2 names there. So Councillor Gregg first.
Yeah, thank you. I have item 7.1. I have an interest there in having already expressed views, so I won't be taking part in 7.1.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gregg.
Thanks.
Councillor Cook, did you indicate?
Yes, thank you, Convener. 6.2, the Cromwell Road application. One of the neighbours who's put in a letter of representation is someone I know reasonably well in a social context, so I will be withdrawing from that one. Okay, thank you very much. And Ms. McBain, I'll take a note of that. Okay, moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting. At 4.1, we've got the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Development Management Committee of the 22nd of April 2021 for approval. They're set out in pages 9 to 16. Can we agree that? Okay. And then at 4.2, we've got the minutes of the Planning Development Management Committee predetermining hearing of the 15th of March 2021 for approval. They're set out in pages 17 to 28. If we can just agree those. Excellent. I'm just taking silence as agreement, as I'm sure you'll indicate if you otherwise feel. Okay, thank you, committee. Moving on to the committee planner at 5.1. That's set out in pages 29 to 32. As you'll see, that all the items for on the planner for today's date are on the agenda. Is there any other comments required? Again, I'm not seeing any indications. So we can just move on to where the business of today. Now, 6.1, I know that Councillor Cook, if you want to leave the meeting now. I think it's 6.2 is the one where I'm... Sorry, so it is. Sorry, I went and marked it with the wrong cross. Sorry about that. Oh, you're okay. Okay, moving on to 6.1 then. It's detailed planning permission for the erection of the Food Hub Innovation Facility, the CPOD commonly known, Class 4, with access, parking, landscaping and associated works. Land at Crabeston North and Moulton Farm, Aberdeen. It's set out in pages 33 to 66 and the planning reference is 210146. And we've got Aoife to take us through that application. Over to yourself, Ms. Murphy.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just share my screen.
Thank you. That's it.
Is everyone able to see that? Oh, great. Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, convener. As the convener mentioned, this is pages 33 to 66 in your agenda pack. Detailed planning permission is sought for the erection of the Food Hub Innovation Facility, referred to as Seed Pod, and other associated works, including access, parking and landscaping on a site located with OP18, Crepeston North and Walton Farm. The application is before members as it is considered to be a departure from the local development plan. The site is located north of the A96 beside Walton Road and to the south of the wider OP18 allocation. The building would be located towards the east of the site and will be bound by car parking and a service yard. Access and egress to and from the site would be via the A96 and Walton Road, and a new spine road would be located to the north of the site. No representations have been received and no consultees have raised any objections to this proposal. As outlined in the local development plan, OP18 requires a master plan. However, given the small-scale nature of the site, it was agreed that a development framework for the larger site and a master plan for the application site would provide sufficient detail. A preliminary development framework was submitted and assessed, and while it is acknowledged that the wider plan contained within the development framework is indicative, it does provide sufficient detail and comfort that the proposed development does not prevent the future development of the wider OP18 site. In addition, a master plan for the wider OP18 site will be required once the land is available for development. Turning to the principle of development, policy LR1, the land release policy, is a material consideration to the assessment of this proposal and outlines what development is acceptable on allocated sites and the timeline for when it should be developed. As the development is a research facility, it is clear that it will constitute the early release of land identified for 2027 to 2035. However, material considerations have been taken into account, such as the options appraisal of available sites in or around the city and shire. The development is contained within the Aberdeen City Region deal, that is supported within the vision of the strategic development plan, and finally, it would not jeopardise the future development of OP18. As such, the planning service is satisfied that this is an appropriate location and are therefore recommending the principle of development be supported as a departure from policy LR1. The layout, siting and design of the proposal is considered to be acceptable and appropriate for this site. All other aspects such as access, parking, noise and odour, drainage and waste provision have been considered, and all elements are found to be acceptable. Overall, it is considered that the development is acceptable and in compliance with all other relevant policies of the current Aberdeen Local Development Plan and those within the proposed Aberdeen Local Development Plan 2020. It is therefore recommended that the application be approved as an acceptable departure, subject to the conditions outlined in the committee report and the conclusion of a legal agreement to ensure payment of the developer obligations. I'll just run through the slides with members at the moment. So this is the site location. So we have the wider OP18 site and the site highlighted in red here. Members will note the location with the AWPR, TECA and the airport. This is the site in relation to the surrounding allocations as noted in the committee report. Again, this is just OP18 and the site highlighted in red there, just to give you a closer view. These are some plans submitted by the applicant, so the application site. This is the site plan, so we have here the building itself, the service yard to the east and the car parking to the west and the new spine road to the north. These are the elevations. We have the ground floor plans and the first floor plans. And these are just some photos of the site. So this is taken from the opposite side of the A96 of the site itself. This is taken from Walton Road looking east towards TECA. And this is looking towards the northeast. This is looking towards OP20 to the south. Some photos of Walton Road itself. And some photos of the A96. I do apologise, these are actually labelled incorrect. So the first photo here is looking west towards the AWPR and the second photo is looking east towards the city. If members have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thanks very much, Aoife. Questions for Ms Murphy? Okay, Councillor Gregg, I saw you first.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Could I ask about the master plan? Because that's quite a desirable element in having a vision and a strategy for developing large areas of land. Will it be quite restrictive in devising the future master plan around the restrictions of giving approval to this application, which will have 60 car parking spaces, the new roads and so forth? Does that not set quite severe limits on what you can do with the master plan in future? You know, it's more or less doing the opposite. It's going the opposite direction of how we want to go. So just any comments on that would be much appreciated.
Yes, of course, Councillor Gregg. We have been in receipt of a development framework which gives a very high level indicative view of how the wider OP18 site could be developed, and we're satisfied that this development isn't going to have an impact on that. It's only a very small portion of OP18, and obviously we will be the site will be subject to a master plan once it comes forward for development at a later date.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks. I was actually struggling to read the site plan. Where's the vehicle access into the car park?
Yeah, of course. The site plan should be on the screen in front of you here. So we have the A96 to the south. I do apologise for the quality. I had to zoom in quite a bit to put it on the slide. So we have the A96 running along the south here. You've access in from Walton Road, and a new spine road is being located just north of the Walton Road junction to provide access to the site. And then we have two new junctions coming off that, which provide access to the car park and then the service yard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Cormie.
Thank you, convener. My question would be related to the flight path and a bird hazard. I see in page 63 the type of landscaping would be important. I'm just not sure what the meaning by that. Shall be replaced by plants similar in size and species to those originally required to be planted, to prevent bird hazardous movements. On page 63. I mean, is the flight path, is the airport, any comments to this at all?
The airport have commented on the application and they have no objection, but they have requested that a landscaping plan be submitted in line with their advisories, and we will be consulting with them once that is submitted to make sure they're happy with what's being proposed.
I would imagine it'd be for migrating birds, some like geese and things like that. There wouldn't be too much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's to make sure that the type of landscaping used doesn't attract birds to the site.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thanks, convener.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any other hands. Bill, can you pop your hand down just in case I keep asking you? Thank you. Okay, members, if I'm not seeing any other questions for officers, the recommendation is on page 50, and it's a willingness to approve conditionally subject to the conclusion of a legal agreement to ensure payment of the developer's obligations. There's also set out on pages 62 to 64 11 conditions, and on page 65, finishing on page 66, there's advisory notes. I'll be moving the recommendations. Is anybody otherwise minded? Again, I'm not seeing any hands, so I can, again, Ms McBain, can we just go around the table just to make sure we've got a recorded note of the vote, please?
No problem. So can members please indicate that they're happy to approve the application as per the recommendation? So convener?
Approve.
Vice convener? Councillor Stewart? Sorry, if you can just indicate that you're happy to approve the application as per the recommendation.
Yes, I'm happy.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Allen?
Approve.
Councillor Cook?
Yes, approve.
Councillor Copeland?
Approve.
Councillor Cormie?
Approve.
Councillor Gregg?
Approve.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Approve.
Councillor Malik?
Approve.
Okay, thank you. So the application is approved in line with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, committee. I think it'll be an exciting addition to Aberdeen's portfolio. So moving on swiftly to 6.2 now, Councillor Cook. I'll get you back in before we obviously head on to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Radley is going to sub for me for this one. So
okay, perfect.
I will see you in due course.
See you in a few moves. Thanks, Councillor Cook. Okay, is Councillor Radley with us? Yeah, she's there. Excellent. Welcome, Councillor Radley. Okay, moving on to 6.2, we've got detailed planning permission for the erection of a single-storey ancillary accommodation to the rear of 56 Cromwell Road. It's set out on pages 67 to 88. Planning reference is 200559, and our planning officer is Gemma Tasker. Ms. Tasker, over to you.
Thank you, convener. I'll just share my screen with the presentation.
Thank you.
So are you able to see that just now?
That's it. Yeah, it's there. Thank you. Yeah.
So this item is found on pages 67 to 88 of the committee agenda pack. Item 6.2 relates to an application seeking detailed planning permission for the erection of a single-storey ancillary building to the rear of the dwelling at number 56 Cromwell Road. The application site itself relates to a 1.5-storey semi-detached dwelling house of granite construction and is one out of 20 dwellings situated on the northern side of Cromwell Road. The site is bound to the east and west by neighbouring semi-detached properties, which are 54 and 58 Cromwell Road respectively, and to the north by plain fields. And we can see that here on an aerial photo as well. So there is some planning history to the site, which relates to a single-storey extension to the rear of the dwelling, measuring a maximum 6 metres in length by 6.9 metres in width, which was granted consent in 2013. This application has been referred to the Planning Development Management Committee because a total of 16 letters of objection have been received in relation to the application, including an objection from the Community Council. The matters raised in these objections are addressed on pages 85 to 87 of the agenda pack, and in summary, the issues raised, including those from the Community Council, largely focus on the construction of a separate dwelling within the curtilage of the application property and how this would constitute overdevelopment of the site, and also the potential impacts associated with this, such as parking provision and drainage. Impacts in relation to residential amenity of neighbouring dwellings were also raised, including those such as privacy and overshadowing. And also many objections raised concerns in regard to the setting of an undesirable precedent for similar developments within the area. So in terms of statutory consultees, comments are provided on page 79 of the agenda pack. Roads Development Management have no objection to the application, noting that the existing driveway provides sufficient off-street parking space. And also the environmental policy team sought a condition be applied in relation to the construction of the proposed path and also appropriate tree protection during construction should the application be supported today. So the key issues in considering the proposal against all relevant local development plan policies are whether the principle of the development is acceptable, the scale and design of the development, the impact of the development on existing amenity, and also other impacts such as parking provision, tree stock, and drainage. So in terms of the principle of the development, the site lies within an area zoned as a residential area, and policy H1 sets out that the proposal would comply with this policy in principle if it does not constitute overdevelopment, the character and amenity of the surrounding area is not adversely affected, and it complies with the relevant supplementary guidance. Further to this, in considering the principle of the development, the planning authority can support the formation of a building which includes ancillary accommodation to the original dwelling. However, it cannot support the formation of a wholly separate independent dwelling within the curtilage of the property. It's recognised that the facilities provided within the ancillary unit would give rise to the potential for it to operate as a separate independent dwelling house. And if this development was permitted without the controls in place to avoid the situation arising, then the proposal would be at odds with the established character of the area and could adversely harm the character of the area by setting an undesirable precedent. Therefore, in order to provide assurance that this will not be a long-term issue, a Section 75 agreement would be required to tie the use of the ancillary accommodation to the main dwelling, which the applicant has agreed to enter into should the committee be minded to approve the application today. This would place a legal restraint on the unit to be occupied by anyone unrelated to the occupiers of the main dwelling house and using the unit for independent dwelling house purposes. So the proposed structure would be located in the northern section of the rear garden, over 1 metre from the surrounding mutual boundaries. It would form an L shape and would measure a maximum 7.2 metres by 9.5 metres and would have a flat roof design at a height of 3 metres. Finishing materials would include a smooth grey render, horizontal timber cladding, and ALU clad timber windows or UPVC windows and doors. The floor plan also shows how the building would be divided up to include a kitchen/living area, a utility room, a shower room, and a bedroom. The proposal has been amended since the original submission in that the roof of the building has been lowered and changed to a flat roof profile. Additionally, following concerns from the planning authority regarding the root protection of trees on the adjacent site, the building has been rotated 90 degrees and subsequently the fenestration arrangement was also updated. And the agent for the application has also provided us with a proposed 3D view of the building within the garden. So while there are a variety of outbuildings located within the surrounding area, with a built footprint of 57 square metres, it was recognised that the proposed building would be substantial and would be larger than those in the surrounding area. But nevertheless, in terms of scale and design, the building would be subordinate to the original dwelling. It would increase built rear site coverage to 29%, which would not be completely at odds with that of the wider surrounding area. Materials would be contemporary and would match that of the existing rear extension, and more than 50% of usable rear garden space would remain undeveloped. Additionally, overall, the proposal would be considerably well screened within the rear curtilage. While the proposal would be somewhat more visible during winter months from the adjacent playing fields, it would be viewed within the context of a residential curtilage, appearing as an ancillary building, and overall it's considered that the proposal would have limited impact on the visual amenity of the streetscape or the surrounding area. So in terms of the impact of the proposal on existing neighbouring amenity, the proposed building would be located sufficiently distant from neighbouring windows to ensure no impact on internal daylight receipt levels. In terms of overshadowing, calculations indicate that there would be no significant increase in the overshadowing of neighbouring garden ground. And in terms of privacy, the site is considered to be sufficiently well screened by way of a 1.8 metre high timber fence along the boundaries with neighbouring properties to ensure no overlooking of their private rear garden grounds or ground floor living accommodation. It is recognised that there would be views of the dormer at first floor level at 58 Cromwell Road. However, there would be a separation distance of some 23 metres between these windows, and therefore this relationship is accepted. Additionally, habitable rooms within the proposed ancillary building are located towards the boundary with 54 Cromwell Road, and this has much denser screening and would highly limit any views of their property. So the proposed building would therefore provide little opportunity for any overlooking of neighbouring properties or their garden ground. It is recognised, though, that there would likely be a higher increase in activity within the rear curtilage in comparison to that generated by other ancillary buildings. However, activity would be predominantly contained to within the rear garden ground of 56 Cromwell Road, which is sufficiently well screened, and additionally, any impact would be from a one-bedroom ancillary structure, which would be linked to the main house and would not be a wholly separate dwelling. Therefore, it's not considered that this would cause significant harm to the enjoyment of neighbouring dwellings or their garden ground. In regard to the existing tree stock then, while these are not protected under a tree preservation order, all trees are a material consideration. It was considered that the development as originally proposed would likely have had an impact on the tree located in the northwest corner of 54 Cromwell Road. And as mentioned, in light of this, the proposal has been amended since the original submission, so that that courtyard area would be located in the northeast corner of the plot, which would form a root protection area for the tree concerned. And to ensure any impacts to trees is limited, conditions are proposed, which are detailed on page 88 of the agenda pack. In terms of parking provision, there's an existing driveway which extends along the side and front of the application property. While this driveway does not meet modern standards, as this is existing, it is accepted and Rose Development Management have no concerns. And lastly, in relation to drainage, a drainage assessment report was requested by the Planning Authority, and this details the disposal of foul and surface water. This was also reviewed by colleagues in Rose Development Management who had no concerns. So I can just show you a couple of site photos as well. So this is looking north towards the adjacent playing fields, and we can see the neighbouring mutual boundaries on either side there, which are screened by a 1.8 metre high timber fence. And then looking southwards towards the dwellings, we've got the adjoining property 58 Cromwell Road, and to the other side it's 54 Cromwell Road. And we can also see the existing single-storey extension to the rear there. So in conclusion, the proposal to provide ancillary accommodation within the rear garden ground is considered appropriate for its intended use and appears ancillary to the main dwelling house without unduly affecting the character of the surrounding area, subject to the applicant entering into a Section 575 agreement to tie the unit to the main dwelling house. While there would likely be a higher level of activity within the rear curtilage, this is not considered to be of a significant degree that would cause significant harm to the amenity of immediate neighbouring dwellings. Officers have concluded that, subject to the legal agreement, the proposal would suitably accord with the relevant provisions of the local development plan for the reasons set out in today's report on pages 87 and 88 of the agenda. The recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions mentioned on page 88 of the agenda, and the applicant entered into a Section 75 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very thorough presentation. Questions? Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions. The first one is about the tree protection plan that's mentioned on page 84. The proposal has been remodelled to try and preserve trees. But how is the tree protection plan enforceable? Does it more or less function like a tree preservation order, or is there some other way of ensuring that there's the enforcement of that policy on trees?
So the tree protection plan will be required to be submitted, and the tree protection will need to be erected and be on site throughout the development to ensure that the development doesn't cause any harm to the protection, the roots of the trees. I don't think this would be any. This would just be a condition. So if this didn't happen, it would be a breach of conditions and enforceable that way. Okay,
thank you. So it protects the tree. It ensures that there is the existing trees in place and they're protected. Okay, yeah. Okay, thanks for that. The second question is from page 82. There's mention. I mean, there've been quite considerable efforts to try and address concerns and to remodel this proposal. And one of the key concerns was that this could have become a separate dwelling place. The Section 75 agreement is to prevent that. But how is that enacted? It's not in a condition. So how is that again enforced?
I'm not sure if someone from legal would like to.
Okay, Mr. Thompson, could you perhaps help?
Good morning, committee councillors. Yes, the Section 75 agreement is negotiated and signed off before planning permission is released. So planning permission wouldn't be released until that agreement has been finalised and signed by the applicants. And then that agreement would then attach to the land. So if there's any change in ownership, then the Section 75 would go along with the property thereafter.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. It's just that wasn't. It's not in a condition. So I wondered, is the intention that would be imported by the committee, by a potential committee decision?
Yes, that's correct. The potential committee decision would say subject to conditions and subject to successful conclusion of a legal agreement.
Right. Okay. Many thanks. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Thompson. Thanks, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener. I was thinking to myself about this application, and maybe some stalwarts of the planning committee will remember there was a very similar one, I'll just say around Whitehall area in the West End. So what my questions are, if the planning application is approved, that would mean, I ask as a question, that if the applicant is to sell their home, then they can't sell that what is being proposed, the application at the bottom of the garden, separately. It has to become as all one and part of that property. That's the first question.
Yeah, that's right. So that's kind of the purpose of the Section 75 agreement, is to ensure that it wouldn't be sold separately.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to clarify that simply because obviously this goes out after we've spoken, and so the members of the public can actually hear that specific point. Also, I noticed, Ms. Tasker, that you mentioned that there might be increased activity in the garden, but equally, would you not agree that if it is your garden, you could have activity in any part of your garden? You know, you could start to use that bottom part of the garden whether there was a development or not. You know, you could just be coming and going down there.
Yeah, exactly. So the view was taken that the activity probably wouldn't be any greater than that associated with a normal domestic activity.
Okay, thank you. And also to ask, should a business be operated from there? And I'm not expressing a view about that. Would that have to be a business that is related to the home, as in those that live in the home or extended family, such like, rather than it being rented out to somebody else? This was the issue that came up at the one at Whitehall whilst it's historical. It went on for many years.
Yeah, so the Section 75 should ensure that the dwelling is only occupied by relatives of the main dwelling house. So it should stop the accommodation being rented out to anyone else for any other purposes, whether that would be for residential or commercial.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, you did say there was no real overlooking of other properties from the proposed development.
Yeah.
And is it relevant in terms of the objections that were, or points that were raised and in the papers, that there is already an extension at the rear of the property?
Yes, so in terms of the extension to the rear of the property, that was just taken into consideration when we looked at the level of development within the garden ground. And the only kind of criteria that applies in the assessment is that 50% of usable rear garden space remains undeveloped, which, following calculations, the proposal did meet.
Okay, thank you. And I think I just had one other actually. And there has been quite a lot of compromises made by the applicant. Is that right?
Yes, a few amendments were sought, which were mainly in relation to the trees on the neighbouring site. Some other amendments were made, such as the lowering of the building and also changing it to just a flat roof profile.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Tasker. Thank you, convener. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, convener. I've only got a couple. It's basically about dimensions. Can you tell me how far it is from the main dwelling to the basically front of this proposed building?
I would need to measure it just here on the proposed site plan. I think it was around, I want to say 19 metres.
Okay.
From the window on the neighbouring property at 54 Cromwell Road, there was a distance of 23 metres.
Was it? Right. Now, what about from the rear of this building to the rear fence facing onto the playing field? Do we know how far into the site it is?
From the rear of the proposed building to the rear fence?
Yes, please.
I think that was around 1.5 metres.
Okay,
To the side,
what
either side is 1 metre, so To the rear is slightly more.
That was going to be my next one. Thank you for that. Right, is there any special conditions regarding noise abatement?
There's not. So when we considered the impact of the building in terms of increase in activity, I know that noise was picked up on by some of the objections. However, just as I mentioned in a previous comment there, any noise was considered to be associated with normal domestic noises, so such as walking to the building or sitting out in the garden ground. It wasn't considered that this would be any greater than any other residential development.
Okay, and can you just confirm that the access to this building could be by a path up the side of the existing house?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Copeland. Any other questions? I'm not seeing anybody else indicating. Okay, no, I'm not. So if we move to page 77, where the recommendation is to approve conditionally with legal agreement, I'll be moving the recommendations. The conditions are set out, there's 2 of them on page 88. Is anybody otherwise minded? No, I'm not seeing any indication. I'll just get Mrs. McBain to go to, again, a verbalised vote. Mrs. McBain?
Thank you, Convener. So again, if members can just indicate that they're happy to approve the application in line with the recommendation. Convener?
Approve.
Vice Convener?
Approve.
Councillor Allen?
Approve.
Councillor Cook?
Oh, it's not here.
Sorry, Councillor Radley.
Approve.
Councillor Copeland?
Approve.
Councillor Cormie?
Approve.
Councillor Gregg?
Approve.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Approve.
And Councillor Malik?
Approve.
Okay, thank you. So the application is approved unanimously in line with the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Radley. I assume you'll be stepping out now and Councillor Cook will be stepping back in virtually.
Yeah, just hold on 1 minute. I'll just invite him back in.
Okay, thank you for attending today, Councillor Radley.
Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure.
Okay, it's just calling.
Here.
Hi, Councillor Cook. That's him.
Excellent. Welcome back, Councillor Cook. Okay, members, moving on to item 6.3, which is the conservation area consent for substantial demolition of a single-storey building, side walls and roof with ship row facing wall remaining unaltered, retrospectively. 62 to 64 Ship Row, Aberdeen. It's on pages 89 to 114. Planning reference 210397, and a planning officer today is Lucy Green. Miss Green, could I pass over to you? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I'll just share my screen.
Thinking about it. We've got a nice picture of you with your sunglasses on instead at the moment.
Oh, right. Can you?
It's still not popped up yet.
Right.
I can see it.
That's it now.
I've got it.
I can see Lucy's screen thingy.
Yeah.
Good.
Has everyone got it now? Yeah. Excellent. Over to you, Lucy.
Okay, great. So this is an application for conservation area consent for demolition of the modern building behind the older walls that bound the street frontage and the reduction in height of the eastern boundary wall. And to note is that the work has already been carried out on site. The application is to be determined by committee due to the number of objections. So the site's located on Ship Row between the rear of the Douglas Hotel and the Maritime Museum to the northeast. The passageway to the immediate east of the site leads through to the Adelphi. So this slide is a plan showing the areas to be removed dashed in red. At the bottom of the plan is the Ship Row wall. and to the side is the eastern boundary wall. The structure inside consisted of a flat-roofed modern building. Its roof and side walls have been removed, leaving stub walls and the steel roof beams, and the ship row wall remains intact with no works. So this shows the internal elevation of the eastern boundary wall with the Maritime Museum behind, and the red dashes indicate the area that was removed. And that length is overall a 7-metre length of wall that's been reduced in height to some degree. So this shows the southwest elevation viewed from the passageway that goes through to the Adelphi. And this is a context elevation showing the ship row wall with no works carried out or proposed to that wall. The application is not for the use of the space within the walls. However, this slide indicates the layout of the outside cafe tables and the pergolas, which have been put in place with the remaining walls along the site boundaries. So that's the ship row wall there at the bottom. This area to the left is the Douglas Hotel car park, or former car park. And move on to some photographs of the site. So this is looking at the eastern boundary wall that's been reduced in height. And this is the front section nearest to Ship Row. That's the gates on Ship Row. So the pole here is 2 meters in height. And you can see the first section of the wall there is not altered. And then this is the section that's been removed. I've got a few photographs just looking along the length of the wall. So that's the next section of the wall, stepping back, and that's the Maritime Museum just behind there. Next section, that's where it's getting back to its full height again. Further section. This is a stub wall that remains on between the site and the Douglas Hotel car park, former car park. So that's within the site. The entrance from Ship Row, that wall's just remaining as is. And this is looking from the Maritime Museum side. So this is the first section of the wall. So the reduction starts from here. And that's again the 2 meter pole. And looking back further down the wall. So this is the extent of the reduction at this point here. Another photograph of the same section. And that's looking back down the passageway with the Maritime Museum on the left. Okay, so accompanying the application was a letter from structural engineers confirming the reasons for the wall having been reduced in height because it was unsafe with very large vegetation and cracks. There were over 130 objections received, and these were almost all submitted prior to the revised drawings being uploaded, showing the retention of the ship row wall. Historic Environment Scotland commented on the application, emphasising the special historic character of the conservation area and the contribution to this of not only the ship row wall, but also the traditional high wall to the east. Having had sight of the engineer's letter, Historic Environment Scotland stated that they appreciate that the council must be satisfied regarding the condition of the wall, i.e. that the wall is safe. HES stated that if the council is satisfied that there is sound justification, then they would agree that works to make good would include a reclaimed granite coping. The archaeologist was also consulted and noted that there was no groundbreaking proposed, whilst requesting a standing survey. So in terms of the objections, the matters raised were that they emphasised the importance of this area of Aberdeen as one of the oldest and most historic, and the importance of both walls in contributing to the character of conservation area. And it was further emphasised that the use could take place with the walls remaining at full height. Relevant policies in the local development plan and national policy emphasise the need for proposals to be informed by an understanding of the historic features that contribute to conservation areas, with policy D5 specifically seeking the retention of granite features. The modern structures within the site do not form street boundary features and are not of architectural merit, so the removal of that fabric was considered acceptable. The eastern wall area consists of granite brick and small areas of concrete, and is thought to have been built over time with sections rebuilt. Over recent years, cracks and disuse of the site have allowed vegetation to take hold in the upper sections, and the engineer's letter confirms the safety concerns with this. On the other hand, as noted, the height of the wall is in itself contributes to the character of the conservation area. So in coming to the recommendation, it was noted that the corner section where the east wall meets Ship Row would remain at full height, that the wall would be seen mainly in oblique views, and that a relatively short section would be reduced by a maximum of approximately 2 metres, leaving at least approximately 2.3 metres, with most of the length of the wall at a greater height. Also taken into account is the attachment of a condition requiring a granite coping, and the fact that the proposal would allow for the use of the area as an outdoor cafe, and this enlivens the area of the conservation area, which brings about appreciation of the historic walls and wider area. So the recommendation is for approval with the conditions as noted on page 114, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Green. Questions, members? Councillor Gregg.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Could I ask first of all about that eastern boundary sidewall? There are concerns expressed by the Civic Society about its historical value and its integrity. I have the impression that the work proposed will involve repairs, maintenance, making that wall safe, which is a benefit. But I just wondered about that point of the heritage nature of that wall. Could we have some more information on that?
Well, I mean, it's a mixture of walls and materials that have been built and rebuilt at different times. Historic Scotland really commented on its traditional high nature as being its importance in terms of the conservation area. I mean, its exact sort of history in terms of dates is, you know, slightly unknown and varies over time. So I think that's all I can say on that.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, I appreciate that there has been a history of remodeling of the wall. So thanks for that. The other one, the other question is related to that. I think there was the concern that the Ship Row wall would end up being a standalone facade. So are there any concerns about its vulnerability, or are there any risks? Just for clarity, I mean, I would be surprised because it is obviously a very stable masonry built wall, but you know, it would just be helpful to hear any comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, the steel roof beams remain from the modern building, so that gives it a bit more stability, as well as the east wall, and it has been signed off by a structural engineer, which we've had sight of the letters, but also in terms of building standards, you know, it's been signed off for its stability.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, it's just a brief one in relation to condition number 2, which requires details of the coping to be delivered within 1 month of the permission. I'm totally comfortable with it. I just wondered whether 1 month the applicant might say that's unreasonably a short period of time. I'm happy with it. I just wanted to check the kind of legal issues around that.
Yeah, I mean, there has been discussion with the agent on that, and he has noted on the drawings the granite coping. So, you know, there's relatively little that they have to do in the first month. That's just the information to be provided.
Thanks. That was my only question on it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Cormie.
Thank you, convener. My questions are centred around about the lane between the Maritime Museum and the eastern side of the wall, Ms. Green, that leads up to the Adelphi. Does that lead on to the proposed site? Because I remember Councillor Gregg will remember this, about 12 years ago, that was subject to a lot of antisocial behaviour in that lane. Who actually owns that wall?
It would be the Douglas Hotel, as far as I'm aware. It is the lane that leads up to the Adelphi, yes. So the application has been put in on behalf of the Douglas Hotel.
Yeah, I mean, I have been in that lane, so correct me if I'm wrong. That lane does not lead into the proposed site that they are proposing for the beer garden, does it? It goes right up to the top and goes on to the Adelphi. Around the side
It goes right
as an
up
anchor,
to
I
the
think.
top, yes, and it comes out. It doesn't come out within the site. It comes out alongside the Maritime Museum.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see any more hands for questions, members. The recommendations are on page 107, which is to approve conditionally. The conditions are set out. There's 2 of them on page 114. I think probably as a committee, you know, we're always rather uncomfortable when we get retrospective. However, I think there's been a lot of work done by officers in consultation with Historic Scotland to make sure that we preserve the conservation area on this elements of this particular application. So with that in mind, I'll move the officer's recommendation, which, as I say, is to approve conditionally. Is anybody otherwise minded? I'm not seeing any hands. Mrs. McBain, can I just get each of you to the verbalised vote? Thanks.
Thank you, convener. So again, if members can just indicate that they're happy to approve the application in line with the recommendation. So convener.
Approve.
Councillor Stewart.
Approve.
Councillor Allen.
Approve.
Councillor Cook.
Approve.
Councillor Copeland.
Approve.
Councillor Cormie.
Approve.
Councillor Gregg.
Approve.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Approve.
And Councillor Malik.
Approve.
Thank you. So the application is approved in line with the recommendation.
Excellent. We're moving on to item 7.1. I think Councillor Gregg, you indicated you need to come out for this one. Yeah, he's gone. Okay. Thanks, folks. Okay. Moving on to my paper in front of me. Item 7.1, which is detailed planning permission for the formation of access parking area and covered bike shed for allotments with associated work, land north of 15 Craigden, Aberdeen. It's set out in pages 115 to 140. The planning reference is 210283, and our planning officer is Eva Murphy. So over to you, Ms. Murphy.
Thank you, convener. I'm just in the process of sharing my screen, so hopefully it'll appear soon.
Okay, thank you. Perfect, it's there.
Perfect. Okay, this is item 7.1, and on your agenda packets, pages 115 to 140. Detailed planning permission is sought for the formation of vehicular access and 4 car parking spaces and bicycle storage. The facilities are proposed to serve the future allotment use in the northeastern part of the site. As outlined in the report in front of members, the allotments themselves don't require permission as they do not constitute development. As such, no application for a change of use is required. Therefore, the only aspect requiring to be assessed at this time is the formation of the access, the car parking spaces and the bicycle storage. The application is before members. Of 12 representations have been received in total, 11 objecting to the development and 1 containing neutral comments. These comments have been outlined and addressed within the committee report. Roads Development Management has advised that it has no objection, and there have been no comments submitted from Woodhead Community Council. Turning to the principle of development, this has been assessed against policy H1 residential areas, and due to the site being designated as green space network and functioning as amenity space for the surrounding housing development, an assessment against policy NE1 green space network and policy NE3 urban green space was also required. In terms of policy H1, it is not considered that the proposal would be so significant that it would result in a conflict with the criteria of policy H1. Turning to policy NE1 green space network and policy NE3 urban green space, the planning service must take into account the material considerations, such as the planning history of the site. And upon reviewing the plans associated with the previous applications, it is clear that this site is designated as open space as part of the surrounding residential development. It is therefore considered that while there is no conflict with policy H1, the proposed access and area of hard standing for parking and bicycle storage would result in a detrimental impact on the character of the green space network and would also result in the loss of an area of urban green space, which was designed to serve the surrounding properties. As such, it is considered that there is a conflict with the criteria of policy NE1 and NE3. Therefore, the planning service are unable to support the principal development in this case. The site also contains a number of mature trees which are protected by a tree protection order. The submitted tree survey was reviewed and short and long-term impacts of the trees measured, and overall it is considered that the proposed layout will result in an adverse impact on the existing tree stock and will compromise the retention of existing trees. As such, it is considered that the proposal is not compliant with policy NE5 trees and woodland. Other aspects such as design, amenity and access were considered and were all found to be acceptable. Overall, it is considered that the proposal would have an unacceptable impact on the character of the green space network and would result in the loss of an area of designated open space with amenity value, which is not compliant with policies NE1 and NE3. In addition, the works and activities required to be undertaken to the protected trees are not considered appropriate when assessed against the criteria of policy NE5. It is therefore recommended that planning permission be refused for the reasons outlined in the report. If members, I'll just go through slides with members. So this is just to give members an idea of the site's location in relation to the Langstracht and Queen's Road. A closer view of the site in relation to the surrounding development. The application location plan submission by the agent showing the site, and the blue shows the area owned by the applicant. The site location. The existing site plan showing the contours of the site and the trees within the site. This is the proposed site plan, so we can see the access comes off Craigden Road to the south. We have an area of hard standing and we have a parking area and bicycle storage. The rest of the site shows the number of allotments that are proposed. The proposed bike storage. And these are just some photos of the site. So the first one here is taken from the public road looking into the site, and the second one is of where the access would be looking onto the public road. This is looking towards the northeast of the site. Looking north on the site, some photos looking towards the western boundary, so we can see we have some properties up on higher ground. This is looking towards the proposed access and number 15 Craigden, and this is looking towards number 15 and a small portion of number, so this is looking towards number 14 and a small portion of number 15. And then some images of the public road itself, looking up and down the road. Thank you. If members have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Murphy. Questions, members? I'm not seeing. Oh, is that no? I'm not seeing any hands.
Convener,
oh, sorry.
My hand up.
Okay. Would you like to ask your question, Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you. What I wanted to ask is, this piece of land has had a number of planning applications proposed, and often it's the concern was to do with entry and egress. Would you say that that is part of the problem here? I'm just reading sort of the third paragraph in the background and overlooking as one of the properties at Craigden. And I also wonder, is there any appropriate use for this piece of land, or is it just a piece of land that should remain open?
Okay, Councillor Stewart, in terms of access, I might get the roads officer to help me out here. This has been assessed and the access and egress to and from the site isn't considered to be an issue in this case because of the low level of parking and the proposed activity of the site. So that's not considered to be an issue from our perspective and it is not a reason for refusal in this case. In terms of the use of the site, it is designated as open space in relation to the surrounding residential properties and from our perspective shouldn't be developed upon because it is for the use of residents in the area.
Thank you for that. Can I continue, convener?
Yes, please.
Sometimes it's actually difficult to make a question, well, not make the question, but couch your words about offending people. But this piece of land does seem to generate a lot of problems in terms of concern from the residents and the activities on that land. Abandoned vehicles, trees being cut down. Is there anything that can mitigate any of those plans in terms of this application or future applications?
I suppose the difficulty in this instance is the piece of land is owned by a private applicant, so it's hard for them. They, in theory, should be keeping it as open space for the public, and it is open space for the public at the moment, as in people can go onto it and access it. But obviously there have been previous applications on the site, so that it looks like they're wanting to do something with the site. But because it's designated as open space, we would prefer it to remain as such. If there's issues with the site in terms of what they're doing with it that precludes access to the site, then that's potentially an issue that we need to look at from an enforcement aspect, if there's anything that can be done. But in this case, we're proposing that it remains as open space.
Thank you. I know, and it wouldn't be remotely confidential, but I know the fire service have been up at my request and that of residents to look at the abandoned vehicles on that site. But if you're telling me that enforcement can do something about that, then that's helpful to know. Thanks very much.
Sorry, just in terms of enforcement, it may be that they can't do anything in relation to abandoned vehicles because that's not a planning consideration. It would be more so if access was removed to the site, that the public couldn't gain access to it, as it's an area of amenity space. In terms of abandoned vehicles, that would be an issue for Police Scotland.
Sorry, thank you. Can I just come back? Sorry, convener, about this, because this area of land over my time has generated multiple applications. Is that are applicants advised when they put in an application for this site or any other site that it is likely or unlikely something will be approved, so that they're crystal clear from the beginning? I mean, obviously, I understand it comes to committee and a determination is made on the day, but are applicants advised at when dealing with officers?
In terms of pre-application inquiries?
Yes, sorry, in terms of pre-application.
Yeah, so they will come to us and we would provide them with advice based on the information we have in front of us at the time. And then the application would be submitted and it would be determined based on information available to us.
Okay. I think it's important sometimes to tease out the questions so that, because we are doing it remotely and as this is heard by the public afterwards, and I know, for instance, one of the community councils that I'm on, they listened to it and they found it quite helpful to hear sort of extra detail so that they actually understand, because they're not sitting in the committee room. Hopefully we will be soon, convener, but so thank you for your indulgence on that, and Mr. Murphy, thank you for answering all those questions.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. I've got Councillor Cormie, then Councillor, oh, well, actually, Mr. Leach, I'll take you in first because I just noticed your hands up. Perhaps that might be helpful and help the questions that are coming.
Yeah, thanks for that, convener. I just thought I'd step in there just to make the point about the allotment use that's proposed. So as is summarised in the report, planning permission isn't actually required to form those allotments that are shown on the plan there. However, if the applicant or the developer did choose to proceed to form those allotments, they could do that without requiring planning permission. And then what's proposed through this application in terms of an access related to that use, then that could be revisited. But we don't have that at the moment because the allotments haven't been formed.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful, Mr. Lee.
Thanks.
Councillor Cormie.
Thank you, convener. I think most of us has been in that site, and certainly the last application, there was no way that I was going to accept that, but roads are not objecting to this time. Can Ms. Murphy remind me how many TPOs are on that site? There's a lot of wasteland on that site. I mean, as far as the used by the local community, as far as I could see, the only thing that was being used was dumping garden waste on the site. There was no, is there core paths going through there or anything as well?
Thank you, Councillor Cormie. There is a tree protection order 250 that it covers the whole site and some trees out with the site boundary. So all the trees within the site are protected. In terms of core path, there's nothing going through the site, but there is a core path, as far as I'm aware, running along the river to the south.
Yeah, I appreciate the 250 trees, TPOs, but they're certainly not in that site 250 trees. Can you tell me how many on that site?
Sorry.
TPOs on it?
Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you there. The tree preservation is number 250, so there's not 250 trees. I think 37 trees were assessed under the tree survey.
Yeah. Okay, if I'm breaching into anything here, stop me, convener. But I mean, we've seen the site. We've been in that site, and it really is. I mean, it's just a vast waste open space. I mean, it's no more green amenity than I would have thought this type of development would have benefited the local community.
Mm-hmm. I think Bill, sorry, Councillor Cormie, what I would suggest is Mr. Lee has said in his previous kind of just before this question that allotments clearly don't require planning permission, and what I think Mr. Leach was getting to was that if the allotments were actually established first, that the application could then come, or the applicant could then come back in and revisit the need for access. So I think that was perhaps, and hopefully I'm not putting words in your mouth, Mr. Leach, and you maybe can just confirm that's what you were saying, but that was my understanding from your comments.
Yes, that's right. That was the point I was making about the allotments. They could be formed, and then that would be a new use that would be established on that land.
Yeah, no, thank you, convener. Thank you, Mr. Leach. I mean, I did read that. It seems a strange way of going about it. Put in the allotments first and then apply for the application when the roads are saying it's okay. So you can maybe help me further out here, Mr. Leach. How many trees would you have to take down to create these allotments?
I could probably jump in here. It's outlined in the report under impacts on trees. So 37 trees were surveyed, with 10 of those requiring to be removed for safety reasons. They're identified as numbers 5, 6, 12, 20, 21, 28, 29, 30 and 36. The remaining 27 trees would be retained. A number of trees have already been removed for safety reasons. So in terms of the site plan I have in front of me, I can't say for sure. I'd need to look at the tree survey, but the red ones here, all the red trees would need to be removed for safety reasons. And then there's a number of works that will be required to the trees to provide the allotment use. But again, I would remind members that the allotment use doesn't actually require permission, but this has been assessed because of the extensive nature of the red line boundary.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Murphy. Thanks, convener. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Just so you know, Councillor Cormier, if you look at page 136, I'll just give you that little bit more detail that you might want to look at while we're still chatting. Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, convener. Most of my proposed questions have already been answered, but can you tell me the proposed actual development, the car park, what percentage of the site would that cover?
I couldn't say off the top of my head, Councillor Copeland, so I wouldn't want to lie to you in that aspect. But looking at the site plan, maybe 10%, 15% maybe.
Okay, and that's just basically at the entrance. Where the entrance is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Stewart, did you have another question, or is your hand a legacy?
Do you know it's a legacy? I couldn't get it to go up the first time. Okay.
It's okay, I have that problem a lot. Okay, members, I'm not seeing any other hands. I have the officer's recommendation, which is to refuse the application. You know, I can hear that obviously there's a level of confusion because it's quite a complicated application, although you wouldn't think it should be a complicated application, but because we've got roads not objecting, but yet what we're saying is that it is a space of an area of open space that could potentially be used for allotments. But I think what officers are trying to say is let's get the allotments in place before we actually then provide the access, so that, you know, it is actually that's going to come forward, and it's not just a means of gaining access or anything else. So I think that's where the kind of the rub comes. Councillor Copeland, is your hand up again, or is that a legacy?
It's up again, convener. I just wanted to ask a question. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine, please.
If we were minded to grant this application, can we make it a condition that the allotments are formed first? Or is that, would we have to do it the way Mr. Leach said, that they do the allotment and then come back to us?
I know that I certainly had that condition put on when somebody had to establish an entrance into their before they built a house. But maybe I could ask Ms. Murphy.
Yes, of course. We could potentially word a condition that reads that the parking and access couldn't be formed until the allotments were in place, if that's what members were minded to do.
Okay.
Sorry, convener, I'd maybe just ask for some legal thoughts on that, because it's trying to control that through a condition in terms of the formation of the allotments, but because they don't require planning permission and because they're not part of this application, it might not be competent to do that. But maybe Mr. Thompson could come in on that.
Mr. Thompson? It's not an easy question for you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, no, that was my thoughts as well, is that as planning permission isn't required for the allotments, that it would be potentially the condition requiring their formation first may be unenforceable. So there's a bit of a risk there, I think, if we try to go down that route. So I agree with Mr. Leach.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay. All right, members, as I say, we've got the recommendation, which is to refuse on page 132. I will move officers' recommendations. I do think there's an avenue open to the applicant if they want to do the allotments, to put them in first and then to revisit access. We've heard obviously from legal advice that, you know, to try and do it the other way around could potentially cause us an unenforceable situation. So is anybody otherwise minded? No, I'm not seeing any hands. Ms. McBain, could I get you to perhaps do or could I get you to do the verbal vote, please?
No problem. Thank you, convener. So if members can just again indicate that they're happy to refuse the application in line with the recommendation. So convener?
Refuse.
Vice convener?
I refuse, but I would like to see allotments there.
Councillor Allen?
Refuse.
Councillor Cook?
Refuse.
Councillor Copeland,
Refuse reluctantly.
Councillor Cormie,
Refuse.
Councillor Mackenzie,
Refuse.
and Councillor Malik.
Refuse.
Okay, so the application is unanimously refused.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we all struggled with this one. I don't think anybody was alone on it, but I think we've got to do it the right way round to make sure that we get what we think we're going to get. So if we move now on to, you'll be glad to hear the last application today, which is 7.2.
Convener, sorry to interrupt you. If I can just invite back in Councillor Gregg.
Sorry.
Hold on 1 minute.
I forgot. How could I forget about Councillor Gregg? Are you with us, Councillor Gregg?
I'm just dialing them in, so it should just be 9 minutes.
No problem. Yvonne, I keep thinking you're going to break into sound like the Sound of Music with that hills behind you. Oh, here's Councillor Gregg.
You're safe enough.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back, Councillor Gregg. Okay, members, if we move on to item 7.2, which is planning permission in principle for the erection of an active retirement community, circa 60 units, in a mix of apartments, cottages, houses, and a 20-bed nursing home, including small-scale local shop and cafe, community allotments, and associated infrastructure at Bing Hill House, Bing Hill Road, Aberdeen. This is on page 141 to 192, planning reference 200750, and our planning officer today is Mr. Gavin Clark. Get your name right today, Gavin.
Yes, thanks, convener. I'll just get my presentation up and then we can get going with this one. So if you just let me know when you can see that, and then I'll start.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll take you through the slides for the proposal, which some of you might remember from our recent predetermination hearing. So we have the application site up here in the sort of north of the screen. We have the settlement of Mill Timber, North Deeside Road down the south, Bing Hill Road, Contler Road, and the Old Fold development, which is under construction. Next, just an image showing the location of the site to the north of Mill Timber. Another aerial photograph of the site showing Bing Hill House here and its associated grounds and the trees that are within the site. And next is just some images of the site showing, first one shows existing access, second shows the access to the steading buildings to the east of that. Third one shows from Bing Hill Road, that access I just mentioned, and the fourth one is the existing access to Bing Hill House, which runs through the avenue of trees, these trees are the ones that are covered by the tree preservation order. Next is just three other images, two within the site, number 1 and number 3, and the second one looking south towards Old Fold. These three images again just show the application site as it is at present. Again and again, just another 4 photographs just showing the current situation on site with Bing Hill House shown in pictures 2 and 3. The next image shows an indicative site plan, and as I'll come on, this is indicative, so just potentially shows what could be accommodated on site with Bing Hill House, a number of houses, the access down in this corner, the retirement home proposed here, cafe proposed here, and a shop, village green. But as I say, this is just an indicative plan. And finally, I'll just leave this aerial photograph up as I go through my presentation. So the application site, which extends to approximately 8.4 hectares, is located to the north of the settlement of Mill Timber and accommodates the Category C listed Bing Hill House and its associated landscape setting. The application site is located as in the green belt and green space network in the Aberdeen Local Development Plan, with similar designations in the proposed Aberdeen Local Development Plan. The proposal seeks planning permission in principle for what the applicant describes as an active retirement community of circa 60 units in a mix of apartments, cottages and houses, along with a 20-bed nursing home, and would include a small-scale shop, cafe, community allotments and associated infrastructure. It should be noted that as the proposal is for planning permission in principle, Finalised details would be required through any future applications for either detailed planning permission or approval of matter specified condition. The purpose of the planning permission principle application is to consider the principle of development on site and to set out the parameters for and the scale of development which could potentially be accommodated. In terms of consultee responses, so these are summarised on pages 156 to 159 of the agenda pack, and it is noted that consultees are generally content with the proposal or have advised that the proposal would be acceptable subject to appropriately worded planning conditions. Cultston, Beeldside and Miltimber Community Council have objected to the proposal. The reasons for objection are that the applicant is a departure from the Aberdeen Local Development Plan and the proposed Aberdeen Local Development Plan. The land is zoned as Green Belt and Green Space Network in both plans, and the development is above the generally recognised 90-metre contour. In terms of representations, the proposal was initially subject to 173 letters of representation, which included 147 in objection, 24 in support and 2 neutral comments. Following re-notification, a further 6 letters of objection have been received from parties who had previously commented on the proposal. These representations have been summarised and responded to on pages 180 to 188 of the agenda papers. The main issues and objection to the proposal related to it being opposed to being designated as Greenbelt and Green Space Network, the adverse impact on natural heritage, including ecology and loss of trees, traffic and roads concerns and drainage, along with several other aspects which have been summarised. Those in support also noted the type of development proposed, along with demand for such a use and the benefits to the surrounding area, amongst other issues. So in terms of principle of development, the proposal is contrary to Policy NE2 Greenbelt and Policy NE1 Green Space Network of the Aberdeen Local Development Plan, and that the type of development proposed does not fall within any of the exemption criteria for development described in policy. There is no provision in Greenbelt policy for the building of a housing development or active retirement community. Similarly, there is no support for such development within Scottish planning policy. It is worth noting that the developer put forward a bid to the proposed local development plan to get the site allocated for development, which included a larger site and included an area of land to the northeast. This site was rejected by Council through the LDP process at the meeting of Council on the 2nd of March 2020 for the reason that the site was undesirable as a development site due to its location in the Greenbelt. Access to public transport facilities and community facilities is limited. The site is located in the Dee Valley. Development should not negatively impact on the upper slopes of the Dee Valley or its skyline, as such developments, urban extensions should be located below the 95-metre contour line. As previously discussed, the site is not zoned for housing, and the most appropriate place for assessing the need for new housing is in the development plan. In these terms, the Housing Land Audit of 2020 confirmed that Aberdeen City has an effective land supply of 6,542 homes, and the Aberdeen housing market area has a 7.1-year supply. Due to these supplies, there is no justification for granting planning permission for the development proposed on this application site, as it is considered to be a sufficient and robust supply of housing land, both within the city boundary and within the Aberdeen housing market area. In terms of green space network, the proposed development would not be capable of mitigating the loss of green space to a degree required to maintain a functioning green space network. Enhanced features, are, as indicated within the supporting statements, would not compensate for the loss of this significant area, which would be substantially altered due to the scale of residential development proposed within the cartilage of the site. The proposal would therefore be contrary to Policy NE1 Green Space Network of the Aberdeen Local Development Plan and Policy NE2 Green and Blue Infrastructure of the proposed Aberdeen Local Development Plan. The proposal would also see the removal of a number of mature trees, with the supporting statement indicating an initial loss of 22 trees, which would likely increase due to some of the proposed interventions and the extent that the development would impose on the zone of influence of existing trees within the site. It is a view of the Planning Service that the proposal would therefore be contrary to Policy NE5 Trees and Woodland and its associated supplementary guidance, along with similarly worded policies contained within the proposed Aberdeen Local Development Plan. In terms of natural heritage, the applicant has demonstrated that appropriate consents are in place regarding some of these protected species, and the walkover survey indicates that further mitigation measures could be put in place to ensure that others are not adversely impacted upon. Several further documents would be required at MSC stage to confirm this, were planning permission to be approved. Therefore, whilst there's a degree of conflict with Policy NE8 natural heritage, the impact is not considered to be to such an extent that in itself would warrant a reason for refusing planning permission, given the mitigation measures that could be provided both within the site and on other land adjacent within the control of the applicant. In terms of layout, site and design and the impact on the listed building, it is the opinion of the Planning Service that the change from an open parkland setting with mature trees to a modern housing active retirement community development is not a positive change, and the applicant has not adequately demonstrated that such a development could be accommodated without harming the setting of the listed building. It is a strong opinion of the Planning Service that the proposed development would have a significant adverse impact on the setting of the Category C listed Bing Hill House, and the proposal would therefore fail to comply with Scottish planning policy, Historic Environment Policy for Scotland, Policy D4 Historic Environment of the Aberdeen Local Government Plan, and Managing Change in the Historic Environment setting. The indicative site layout does not provide a harmonious form that could be considered to complement the existing listed building and its landscape curtilage setting, and potentially doesn't illustrate a high quality new village layout as an extension to an established setting, and does not demonstrate that such a development could be located without potentially harming the landscape character, setting and ecology of this part of the Greenbelt. It is therefore difficult to argue that the proposed development could comply with the general principles of Policy D1, quality placemaking by design, and the development would therefore fail to comply with the principles of this policy. In terms of roads and transportation, it's noted that colleagues in Roads Development Management have raised no objection to the application, noting that amongst other aspects, the proposed junction is acceptable in principle, and finalised details of parking could only be controlled at MSC stage. In terms of sustainable travel, the Planning Service has concerns about the location of the development from a public transportation perspective, being located atop a steep hill on Bing Hill Road, which would not be easily walkable by proposed residents, given the nature of the proposed development and anticipated age demographics. Whilst the applicant has indicated that a shuttle bus would be provided to overcome this issue, no details of how a shuttle bus would or indeed could be delivered and operated has been provided. Accordingly, there remains significant uncertainty on the delivery and viability of such a service. The proposal would fail to comply with elements of Policy T3 in that it would be located a significant distance from transport links and wouldn't be particularly well connected to the surrounding network. The solutions put forward by the applicant have potential as a compromise if controlled within a green travel plan and a legal agreement, and the tensions with the aspirations of Policy T3 are not considered to be so significant as to warrant an additional reason for refusing this application. It is also noted that the provision of facilities such as cycle parking and linkages to the wider network could be controlled via condition. The report also looks at other aspects such as waste arrangements, drainage and flooding, noise and air quality, developer obligations, affordable housing, open space, access and informal recreation, low and zero carbon developments and digital technology, all matters which are considered acceptable or could be controlled via legal agreement or associated conditions. So to conclude, the proposed development conflicts with a number of policies contained within the adopted Aberdeen Local Development Plan. The principle of development fails to comply with policies NE1 Green Space Network and NE2 Green Belt of the Aberdeen Local Development Plan and the Scottish planning policy. And if planning permission was granted, there would be a significant adverse impact on the character and landscape setting of the Green Belt. The applicant has failed to adequately demonstrate how a level of development could be accommodated on the site without adversely impacting on the setting of the Category C listed building, therefore conflicting with elements of Policy D1, Quality Placemaking by Design, and D4, Historic Environment, along with various other national documents. And the proposal would result in a number of mature trees within the site being lost, thereby conflicting with Policy NE5, Trees and Woodlands. And finally, the proposal would fail to comply with similarly worded policies in the proposed Aberdeen Local Development Plan, which also does not support the principle of development on site. The report also notes tension and non-compliance with other policies contained within the document, including T3, D2 and NE8, although the Planning Service were of the view that these tensions are not considered to be significant enough to warrant further reasons for refusal of the application. The proposal is therefore recommended for refusal for the reasons detailed in pages 189 to 190, but it should also be noted that if members are minded to approve the application contrary to officer recommendation, then this would need to be subject to conclusion of a legal agreement and a suite of conditions which are detailed on pages 190 to 191. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
You said that all in one breath, I think.
Yeah, I need to cough now.
I know. have a rest. Members, questions for officers? Okay, I'm looking for hands. I'm not seeing any yet.
Councillor Malik.
Oh, Councillor Malik.
Thanks very much, Convener. Can I ask Government, 110 meters of driveways are covered with PPO 125, and some trees been removed from the site. Were they under this TPO?
Yeah, the trees in the first 110 metres, as far as I'm aware, haven't been touched. So these are the protected trees. I think when we spoke at the predetermination hearing, I think the discussion was that there was trees removed from within the site prior to the submission of the planning application, and it wouldn't have required consent to remove those. So that if there were trees removed, it wasn't the ones that have been covered by the tree preservation order.
Okay, and in your report, number of trees will be removed. Can you give us roughly figure how many?
Well, the tree survey indicates that it will be 22 trees. Our tree officer, who was consulted on the application, feels that it'll be a bit more than that, with some of the works that are required, which include you're proposing to use GeoGrid for the access road, and we could only probably confirm the exact number of trees that would be lost when we got a finalised layout, which would come at MSC stage. But the tree officer indicates that if you're going to be constructing houses here, it will impact on the zone of influence of where you're siting those. And if you then construct houses, potentially neighbours will then seek removal of these trees, which are then not protected, to allow more privacy, more light and things like that. So the answer is 22 trees initially, but it could well be more than that, but we won't know until we get a finalised layout showing what they're proposing.
Thanks very much, Governor. Convener, one more. And what is the distance between the proposed development and the new Miltonburg Primary School? Is it less than 50 meters?
I don't have a figure to hand, but from the application site boundary to Bing Hill, Miltonburg Primary School would be about, it wouldn't be very far, so it'd be certainly less than 100 metres, potentially about 50 metres as you suggest.
Thanks very much, Governor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Malik. I think it's worth mentioning to members that I think the pictures that we've got from Google Earth are slightly, well, quite considerably out of date, and I appreciate that officers being able to visit sites are not the same during the COVID situation, because actually we've got a new primary school for roughly 440 kids and 60 nursery, just virtually, as Councillor Malik says, 50 metres away from the development site. And what that's meant is then we've got 5 accesses within probably about 80 metres of each other, so they're virtually touching. So I think that there was a big concern, but it was just that the photographs, unfortunately, you don't see that. And also there's another 550 houses already planned next to the primary school down the hill. So I think just to give, using the local knowledge, I think it's quite important just for members to understand that. Can I ask a couple of questions? On page 158, now it's probably Mr. Cowie and he'll know what's coming. We've got a bit around the public transport where it says that the bus stops are just outside the desired distance. Now, the desired distance is 400 metres and the actual distance is 2.5 times that. I would just like clarity that, my measurements are not great, but I would suggest that's more than just outside. Mr. Cowie.
Yes, thanks, Councillor. I just want to apologise for that slip of word within my roads memo response, but yeah, we are considerably out with the desired distance from North Deeside Road to the south.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cowie. It's just in case anybody else is reading the report, so that we've got clarity on that. I'm not seeing any other hands. I will be moving the officer's recommendation, which is on page 151, and that's to refuse the application. And I check to see if anybody is otherwise minded. I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, folks. All right, so again, I'll take that application as refused. Can I get you, Ms. McBain, again, to do the verbalised vote?
Thank you, Convener. So if members can please indicate that they're willing to refuse this application. So Convener?
Refuse.
Vice Convener?
Refuse.
Councillor Allen?
Refuse.
Councillor Cook,
Refuse.
Councillor Copeland,
Refuse.
Councillor Cormie,
Refuse.
Councillor Gregg,
Refuse.
Councillor Mackenzie,
Refuse.
and Councillor Malik.
Refuse.
Okay, thank you. So the application is unanimously refused.
Okay, thank you very much, members. Members, the date of the next meeting is Thursday, the 17th of June. Now, this afternoon, you'll have been notified that one of the pre-application forums has withdrawn and will be rescheduled. It's the Bridget Dawn one to August. However, the applicant that was coming on after can't attend till 3 o'clock. So we have sent out a new appointment. So I know it's not ideal. I did try and persuade them to reschedule, but unfortunately, I think they must be all fired up and ready to go. So if we could, as many of us could attend, I appreciate that you may have other commitments, but it's been rescheduled to 3 o'clock. So with all that said, members, thank you for your attendance today. As usual, we've given it a rigorous overview and look forward to seeing some of you this afternoon. So thank you, folks.